Hola, ¿qué tal? Well, there's a new expression for you. It's an informal one you'd use with friends, with people you know to some extent already. ¿Qué tal? ¿Qué tal has a variety of meanings. It roughly corresponds to what's up, what's happening. It also can have the suggestion of how you doing, but it doesn't suggest necessarily a deep, profound interest in your well-being, as opposed to ¿Cómo estás?, where the person really wants a response as to how you're feeling. You can respond to ¿Qué tal?" with something such as todo bien, everything's fine. ¿Y tú? And you? Todo bien. Why don't you repeat that? Repeat two expressions. ¿Qué tal? Again, ¿qué tal? And then, todo bien, everything's fine. Todo bien. Repeat it. Remember, it's not todo. We don't want to say a hard D sound. It's a soft tongue coming between the two rows of your teeth and just the tip of your tongue. Todo bien. And when I say bien, it's actually spelled bien. However, we want to soften that B sound too. Just have your lips touch really quickly. Todo bien. Okay. Let's practice that. Hola, ¿qué tal? Yeah, your response is todo bien. Now ask me, or greet me and ask me how things are going. Todo bien, gracias. Okay, I said to you at the end of a lesson one, or at the end of our last class, that we're going to look at the structure of sentences, the formation of sentences found at the end of lesson 1.25. And so let's go and take a look at that section of the lesson right now. Well, partway through the lesson, you come to this section here where you're introduced to, or reintroduced to, the verb tener. And here you simply have the original form of the verb. That's called the infinitive. Tener. And then here you have the different conjugated forms. With yo, this is one of these verbs that has the g that appears only in the first person singular in the yo form. That's yo tengo. And then from here on out, you're going to hear what's called a stem change. You may remember that term used a few lessons ago. That's where the original form, the original vowel sound in the original form of the verb changes to a combination of letters usually. Could be simply one single other letter. But in any case, the stem of the verb, the beginning part of the verb, will change, and the change will be with reference to the vowels in the beginning of that word. So tener, the te, changes to ye. By the way, when I say ye, if I slow it down, what are the two different sounds you hear in ye? Okay, you slow it down. You try and say it. Say ye slower and slower. Ye. You hear the two vowel sounds, e, they make up the sound ye. And that will become very important and really a great advantage of the Spanish language when you start writing the language. You'll see that the names of the letters, which are also the sounds the letters make, the vowels make, e, a, o, u, are exactly the way in which that sound is spelled. That is to say, if you can slow down the blend of vowels together, ye, to the slowest possible rate, where you're saying each sound individually, e, you know exactly how to spell that word. You're going to spell e with a letter that corresponds to e, and I'm not going to talk to you right now about what that letter is. That's for Unit 2. And whatever that letter is that corresponds to the sound which is called that's exactly the letter you'll use in spelling this word. There are no mysteries to spelling the Spanish language. It's a wonderful thing, a very phonetic language. So in any case, there's this stem change that occurs. You say tienes. Tiene for él tiene. Ella tiene and usted tiene. Okay, we're going to look now at the first sentence right here, which deals with a noun which was presented to you in the previous section of this lesson. And if you don't remember what that noun is, there's a good chance you'll be too ill-equipped to go ahead and do the rest of these exercises that follow. You should probably go back to the previous section and get a better idea of what those nouns are within that section. Because they're nouns which are appropriate for our study. They're dealing with the school environment, so it's probably where you'd want to start. But additionally, if you don't know what the noun is, you also can't determine is it a masculine or feminine noun, so you can't form the article either. But let's assume that you already learned the word mochila. which is what this is. When you learn mochila, you heard mochila in the last section, what definite article, the word the, was it preceded by? Was it preceded by el, la, los, or las? Which are those four? Well, hopefully you remember it was la mochila. And by now you're probably picking up on the idea that when a word ends, a noun ends in the sound a, typically it's a feminine word. And therefore we will almost always say la mochila, or la escuela, or la, ¿qué más hay? La muchacha, of course, but let's try la casa, okay? So word ending in a almost invariably is feminine. There are some other typically feminine endings as well, such as ad, ad, ed, ed, s, the letter z, and yon, the letters I, O, and N. However, the most common by far of the feminine endings is the ending a, which corresponds to the letter A. So, yo tengo, now here you don't want to say the mochilas or the backpack, and so we can't say la mochila. We want to decide between un and una. Which of the two articles is the feminine article to say a backpack? Un or una? Well, it's una. And so yo tengo una mochila. Now, this leads us to another very important point, which I'll mention probably several times through today's video, is that it will not always be applicable, but generally speaking, frequently, the ending of the article, whether it be a or the, indefinite or definite, will have the same sound as the end of the noun. So you hear, when you have to choose between un and una, followed by the noun mochila, which is the likely choice you're going to make, the logical choice? It's una, because the ending of the sound is a. Una mochila. As I said, this will not always be applicable, as you'll see, but a word ending in a noun ending in a, because it's feminine, is going to use una mochila, and if it's plural, ending in a with the s sound, mochilas, for example, and you have to choose between unos and unas to say some, which is the likely choice? It's unas mochilas. If ever you say, if you say an expression, you say an article and a noun, and you hear something that doesn't quite fit, you hear a distinction between the ending of the article and the ending of the noun, you need to think carefully, did I just make a mistake? If you ever say unos mochilas or los muchachas, going from os to as or as to os, almost certainly you've made a mistake. And so that can help guide you as you form these sentences. As I said, they will not always apply. Sometimes nouns don't end at all in a or in the letter o, which is typically associated with the masculine form, the masculine gender for a noun. And so in those cases, this recognition of the sound at the end of the article and the sound at the end of the noun will not apply. And I'll point that out as we go along. Let's go on to the second sentence here. Here's tú. Now remember, there's a stem change that occurs in tener, and so when I conjugate it, when I put it in the proper form with tú, I'm going to change the e to ye. So how would that be said? Tú, yeah, tienes, tú tienes. Tú tienes tres. Now this is not an article, so I'm not going to be concerned with the sound of the article at the end of the article and the sound at the end of the noun. It's not going to apply here. This is not a definite or indefinite article. This is simply a number, tres. And then we come to mochila, and the way to make a word plural, of course, is adding the s sound. So mochilas. Tú tienes tres mochilas. In the next one, we have here, how would you say this expression right here? Yeah, it's el tiene. El tiene. You remember that stem change from e, from te and tener, to ye in the conjugated form. El tiene. Now we have to make a decision between this indefinite quantity of backpacks. We're saying some backpacks, between unos and unas. Okay, remember the word mochila, is, when it's made plural, will be mochilas. So what you're going to choose? Unos mochilas, unas mochilas. Which one sounds better to you? Well, it sounds better to me, and I hope it did to you too. Unas mochilas. You hear as at the end of these two words. Él tiene unas mochilas. Next one. Here we're talking about this girl having a book. Okay, what's the word? Let's start first with the word for book. How do you, when you learn the word book in the previous section, did you hear el libro? Did you hear la libro? Which was it? Right, it was el libro. It's a masculine word. Generally speaking, words ending in the letter O. In fact, right now I can't think of a word ending in O, which is feminine. I'm sure they could well exist, but I'm not thinking one. In any case, it's a masculine word, and so we'll always say el libro, el muchacho, el camino. It's a word you don't know. What words do you know that will be examples to us right now? El apartamento, okay? And so el libro, it's a masculine word. Therefore, when we have to choose between the indefinite article un, to say a book, and un or una, which we're going to choose? Well, unfortunately, we can't quite rely upon that idea of the sound at the end of the noun will be the sound at the end of the indefinite article too, because uno is not presented to us as an option. We can't say uno libro. I suppose that would mean one book, the digit one, but we don't really talk like that. We say a book. And so the options are un and una. Well, the best way to remember that it's un, I suppose, is that una is clearly the feminine ending. It has the a sound at the end. And so una, libro, those just don't line up. We got to bring them together. The best we can do is un libro, un libro. Un is the masculine singular way to say the indefinite article a, un libro. Going down a little farther, you just say the sentence without my help. Go ahead. Yeah, usted tiene 6 libros. Usted tiene 6 libros with the plural ending for libro. Next one, this takes a little bit more thought, but not a great deal more. How would you say this? Okay, you had to make the choice between unos and unas for some. Unos and unas, what makes sense? Well, the noun is libro. In the plural form, it's libros. So the sound os at the end of the noun tips us off to the logical choice between unos and unas. It's going to be unos. So, yo tengo unos libros. Can you hear how yo tengo unas libros just doesn't fit? The two of them don't correspond one to another. Unas libros. As and os are just don't belong together. It's yo tengo unos libros. Okay, next section down. Next series here, we have the word calculadora. Ends with the letter A. You can assume, therefore, it's feminine. And indeed it is. It's la calculadora. Okay, so how would you say this sentence? Go ahead on your own. All right, hopefully you remembered the stem change. The te and tene, the e sound changed to ye. So it's tú tienes, and now you have to choose between un and una is the one which would be the likely choice because calculadora ends in an a. So una calculadora. It is indeed a feminine word. Una is appropriate. Next, tú tienes 4 calculadoras. The cuatro, the number, is not going to necessarily have the same sound at the end of it that the noun does. This is not a definite or indefinite article. The number is just a number. Numbers don't change whatsoever in their sound. Cuatro is always cuatro. It's never cuatra. It's never cuatros. It's never cuatras. It's always cuatro. Okay, so don't mess with a number. Keep them such as you learn them initially. So yo tengo 4 calculadoras. The fact that cuatro and calculadoras don't have the same sound at the end, it's not an issue. Cuatro can't be changed. That's the name of the number. It would be like you calling me, well, let's see. Could you make my name plural? Steve's. No. You can't change my identity, just like you can't change the identity of the number 4. But with definite and indefinite articles, the words a, and, some, and the, yes, you can change their form. They are very malleable. They can be they are changed to adapt to the noun that follows them. Okay, and let's do one more example in this section here. How would you say he has some calculators? Okay, so calculadoras ends with the sound as, obviously therefore, unas calculadoras for some, and él tiene unas calculadoras. Let's do one more section together. We'll use the cell phone example here. It's called a celular, and this is a really good example because it is one of those nouns that doesn't end in the sound o or a, and therefore you can't rely upon the sound at the end of the noun tipping you off to the sound at the end of the definite and indefinite article, or at least not totally. Okay, so here we have, I'll talk you through this one. Here we have ella tiene, and then celular. Was it a masculine or a feminine word? Well, if it doesn't end in the sounds, I mentioned there are 4 typical feminine endings, or endings to a noun which can indicate that the noun is feminine. And then there's the one which is the fifth, which is by far the most common, which is the sound a. The others were ad, ed, s, yon. So if the word celular does not end in a, ad, ed, s, yon, I make the assumption that it's a masculine word, and indeed most of the time I'll be correct, and that's the case. It's el celular that you heard in the previous section. It's a masculine noun. And so, knowing it's masculine, I will choose between un and una. I will choose un celular. Now, the sound at the end of un and the sound at the end of celular aren't identical. They don't match up. But that's because there is no article which ends in the sound ar. And therefore, my choice is between un and una. Which is the least likely of un and una to correspond, to say like a cell phone. Which is the least likely between un and una to line up with celular? Well, it's going to be una, even if I didn't know that celular is masculine or feminine, because it doesn't celular does not end this sound a at the end, and so una celular is less likely than un celular. Typically, feminine nouns will end with the sound a. If I don't hear a at the end, and if you can remember those other four endings, ad, ed, s, yon, I can assume it's a masculine noun, and therefore I'm going to say un celular. So ella tiene un celular. Let's go down a little bit farther. This one, go ahead and say it. Not too tough. Remember that the number itself is not an article. It can't change. Dos is dos is dos is dos. Dos never changes. Go ahead, hit it. Yeah, yo tengo dos celulares. Muy bien. Yo tengo dos celulares. And then last of all, this one we can, you go ahead and say it, and I'll talk about it a little bit afterward. You're saying you have some cell phones. The fact that there are three, remember, that just indicates the plural. There could be 5, 6, 7. Okay, hopefully you said, tú tienes unos celulares. Unos celulares. Why unos? Well, because I know that celular, take off the s at the end. Celular doesn't have a feminine ending. It's a masculine noun, therefore. In fact, I remember in the previous section that I said el celular, and therefore it's a masculine word. So between unos and unas, which is this is the correct plural form of the indefinite article saying some, it's unos. Unas is obviously feminine. So tú tienes unos celulares. So the last example, just remember that the ending of the indefinite article or definite article and the ending of the noun will not necessarily always correspond. Unos celulares. Because in the word some, you don't have an option for an indefinite article which ends in the sound es, like celulares. The word ends, if the noun ends in a consonant and you add that extra syllable to make it plural, which that syllable is es, there is no option for an indefinite article that corresponds to that sound es. And so there won't be a perfect coordination of the sounds at the ends of unos and celulares. But, like I said, in the majority of cases, you will have this synchronization. Let me just show you. We're not going to go through the whole section together, but I'll just show you one example right down here that confirms more the rule as opposed to what might be called the exception in the previous one. Here I want to say he has some chairs. Él tiene, okay, the word for chairs, silla. I happen to know it's la silla. It's a feminine noun. But even if I didn't remember that it was la silla, I couldn't remember. Is it el silla? Is it la silla? The plural form of silla will be sillas, obviously. So which of the two indefinite articles, unos or unas in the plural, will correspond to sillas? Well, unas, sillas, lines up quite neatly, doesn't it? Or don't they? Whereas unos sillas, clearly there's something amiss there. Unos sillas don't line up. So unas sillas. That's more the rule than the exception when it comes to making your indefinite articles or definite articles line up with the noun that follows them. Okay. A lot of grammatical talk. It's important. It's important, but remember, it's not the goal. I don't want you to be able to explain Spanish. I want you to be able to speak it. And so we're getting there. We're moving toward the ability for us to converse more and more. In fact, in lesson 1.27, we'll do a lot more conversation than we will trying to analyze the language. But I hope that's helpful. we will look one more time at lesson 1.25 in the course of the next class. There you'll be looking at the test, and I'll be giving some examples of common mistakes made when a person takes such a test. So if you'll please begin at the beginning again, go back to the beginning again of lesson 1.25 and proceed through it. I'll see you in the course of tomorrow's class as we talk about the tests at the end of 125. Adiosito. Nos vemos mañana.